Hey, this is Dr. PMak. Welcome to the Voices Less Heard podcast. And I'm so excited to speak with my next guest today. Today, I speak with Sarah Gawthrop, who writes from the ceded territories of the Sanaimo First Nation and the broader territory of the Coast Salish peoples in so called Canada. She's a poet, an editor, and sits on the boards of the We Sparrow Poetry Press and Room Magazine, one of the oldest feminist literary presses in Canada. Sarah's work has appeared in print publications by Sunday Mornings at the River, Gaisophilia magazine, and Humana Obscura, among many others. Because of an irresistible obsession with forests, nature seeps into the veins and into Sarah's writing. And so I'm so excited to be speaking with her and to be sharing with you just the process of writing, the process of poetry, as well as some interesting conversations that I look forward to having with Sarah. Join me today on Voices Less Heard with Dr. PMak. Sarah, my friend, good to see you.
Hello. Hi. Thank you for having me.
Oh, yeah. Thanks for joining me on this show. And as you know, on Voices Less Heard with Dr. PMak, I always do my best, very best, to invite people that are doing, what I call extraordinary work. So ordinary people doing extraordinary work, right? And yet, in so many ways, we don't get to hear about this work, right? We don't have newspaper articles. We don't have, mainstream media picking up your voice or picking up the work that you're doing. And so I'm like, hey, let's have a podcast. Let's talk to people, and let's hear about all
Yes.
these things.
I love that. Thank you so much.
Awesome.
I'm honored.
Oh, so great to have you, Sarah, on this show. And so I remember meeting with you, a couple of years back and getting to know about you and, the work that you're doing. And I remember sharing my own journey in terms of writing, the writing space, and saying, hey, I have this project that I want to work on. I want to, start writing my memoir. And, I could use a little bit of help. I could use your help. And over the years, you and I have worked very, very closely together on different projects and different writing projects. Um, and so today I want to speak specifically about your work and your poetry and your writing. And so my first question, Sarah, would be, in fact, what inspires your poetry? Do you have any specific experiences or themes that you find yourself writing about or that inspire you?
Absolutely. Mostly I can distill it down to a love of nature
Uh-huh.
and just inspired by and a desire to point others to also be inspired by because I don't know, I'm really like sifting through this a lot right now in my own reflective like memoir style writing, which I've started to do because of a course I'm taking at university. And like, where did that all start in me? And I have this beautiful picture of my 12-year-old self leaning against a big Douglas fir tree. And I think I've realized it was on a road trip to California with my family. And I just have this big relaxed smile on my face and I'm leaning like almost cheek to bark with this tree and I'm writing some reflections and just like I don't even think I knew at that point how important forests specifically would become to me. But I often talk about this forest I call the sacred forest, which is near my home on the Lower Mainland. We of course met when I lived in Victoria.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's mostly a love of nature that inspires my poetry.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. And just reading through your work, you bring a distinct voice. You bring just this, genuine, or another word I might use, authentic voice, right? That speaks to the importance and the beauty, to the beauty of nature. Um, when people think about writing, right? And so I've got so many colleagues and and friends and even sometimes students that say to me, "Oh, writing is so tough. I can't even put 100 words together. I can't even put, let alone a page, 2 pages, and you've got
Mm.
this book that's plus 148 pages or 170 pages, for example, or you've got this book that's got 200 pages. How did you get to write all of that, right?" So can you let us in a little bit into your process? Can you describe your writing process? Do you have any routines, or do you have any rituals? Do you have any, like, how do you get into the flow? How do you get into the
I
flow of writing?
For poetry, it's easy. I think for me, it became a practice and a
Mm-hmm.
muscle, like anything, like working out, then your
Mm.
muscles are sore, but, the more you work those muscles, maybe the less sore you are. And
Yep.
for me, like I'm in university, I'm taking a poetry class, and maybe some students will be like, oh my gosh, I have to write a poem in a week. Like for
Yep.
me, not necessarily will it be like the greatest poem I've ever written, but I have no problem pumping out a poem
Mm-hmm.
because I can write a poem about anything. I can look at this candle sitting on my desk and write a poem about
Wow.
it. It's just like, I guess, yeah, a muscle, something that I really just like put into practice when I
Mm.
started. Like I come from a very artistic family. There's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
music. I did singing lessons. I did acting, like
Mm.
theater as a young kid. I taught myself to play guitar. So I think like I was a songwriter for the most of my young life. And then I
Mm.
just kind of just navigated away from that and
Yep.
picked up poetry and like around COVID, honestly, because I
Mm-hmm.
was stuck at home and I was feeling all sorts of angst and emotion about the world. And so
Yeah.
I found this forest around that time and it
Mm-hmm.
just like bubbled
Mm-hmm.
up out of me writing poems to the woods. So,
Yeah.
and nature poets get kind of a little bit of a, well, not like a bad rap, but they're a dime a dozen, it seems. So sometimes I
Mm-hmm.
feel
Mm-hmm.
like, how can I say this in a new way? And like,
Uh-huh.
nature is so inspiring and awesome that
Yep.
there have to be new ways to say these things. So like that I'll never run out of things to say about nature in the
Sure.
same way like I can just find things about anything to write a poem about. You just
Yep.
have to sit and
Yep.
think. So process wise, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I wish I could say I'm one of those moody poets who has like a little moleskin leather bound book in their bag at all times and is like writing little pensive little notes, but I usually use my phone app.
Yep.
Sometimes I'll speak to text it. I'm a chronic speak to texter and I'll like just say
Yep.
a line.
Yep.
But it's also just like being in school for writing is an amazing gift because
Yep.
it's forcing me to like create a body of work. So having those deadlines with school is also super helpful. It's just basically a discipline is
Okay.
what it is. And just if you
Yep.
try and sit down, like a lot of writers will sit their butt in a chair and be like, I need to do
Yep.
500 words a day
Yep.
or whatever, which, maybe that
Yep.
works for some people. Some people like try and give themselves a rule like that and they're like, I can't do
Mm.
it. So it's just, you
Yep.
got to find what works for you.
So finding what works for you, and allowing the words to flow naturally, I guess, right,
Mm-hmm.
is
Yeah.
what's important. Um, so I think about, so let me talk about your book, right, Topophilia,
Mm-hmm.
right. And so when I just reading, I was doing a bit of research around just the name itself, Topophilia, right. So talking about the affection between an individual and their environment, right. So looking
Mm-hmm.
into topophilia, apparently is a topos comes from the Greek word of meaning place, right? And
Mm-hmm.
philia means love of, and so love of
Mm-hmm.
place. And so talk to us about what led you to naming your book Topophilia. What was going on in
Absolutely.
your mind as you're coming to this name?
Well, first of all, I'm a big word nerd. I love to
Uh-huh.
collect interesting, beautiful words. And
Mm-hmm.
this one came from UVic, a course I took
Ah,
with
University of
Tim
Victoria.
Lilburn, University of
Mm-hmm.
Victoria. Yeah. Tim Lilburn's class, it was called Writing a Strong Sense of Place.
Uh-huh.
And this was the topic of the class. And it was a word he introduced us to. He introduced me to many words, which I still have in a
Wow.
notes app. And I'll go back and look at once in a while if
Yeah.
I want to sound super smart. And I was so enamored of that word. I just
Mm,
like, oh man, I went real deep in studying it. It was
yeah.
coined, I mean, not first, but like
Yeah.
made popular by a geographer, Yi Fu
Yeah.
Tuan,
Yeah. Yep.
a
At the
Chinese
University of
geographer.
Wisconsin. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so
Mm-hmm.
he married it with geography, I guess, but like
Yeah.
I think poets were the original people.
Yeah.
There was a poet, I forget his name. I should have had this. I spoke to this on my Instagram once and on another
Mm-hmm.
podcast.
Mm-hmm.
So really we have poets to thank for the word,
Yeah.
which I think is
Yeah.
kind of an amazing full circle
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
And yeah, for me, it's like, I took another class at UVic with an Indigenous prof,
Mm-hmm.
and it's so interesting to me and fascinating. Whenever you hear of Indigenous people kind of like
Yeah.
introducing themselves, they won't say, we are so obsessed in North American culture of like, what do you do? Like, that's kind of what defines us. But I've noticed with Indigenous
Where are
people,
you
they'll be
from?
like, where are you from?
Where are
Like,
you
what's your
from?
land?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I'm
Yeah.
very concerned with that. And,
Mm.
Obviously as a settler myself, a descendant
Mm.
of settlers, it's a complex thing,
Mm.
that this is not my land. And yet,
Yeah.
in a way, it feels like it is. But I mean, I'm still wrestling through my own decolonization with those feelings. For
Yeah.
now, I just know that I love this land
Mm-hmm.
and I want to like honor it and love it and protect it. And I'm still working around that, and I'm feeling helpless in that area. But
Sure.
that's what my writing is mostly. So it is
Okay.
political in a way.
Yeah. Wow, that's so interesting. And I just wanted to touch back a little bit on, sort of just the indigenous, ways of being and knowing and and in placemaking, right? I see
Mm-hmm.
that too, Sarah, in my own culture, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
From Shona, originally from Zimbabwe, and when when I'm having conversations with with my community, for example, and perhaps it's a first encounter, there's always this, where are you from, right? Yeah, we know
Mm-hmm.
from Zimbabwe, but where is your place? Like, which lands do you belong to? And so there's always just
Mm-hmm.
sort of a powerful connection there that comes through with with just identification with a certain place or to a certain place.
Totally.
And so, speaking about that, and the complexities, right, that you talk about in terms of being settlers. I too am a settler in these beautiful lands, having come from
Mm-hmm.
a different land and a different place. Can you share with us and share with my listeners here, how has, for example, your cultural background influenced your poetry, right? Um, are there I know you speak about the 12-year-old whose cheek was on the bark, and getting this connection with the land and with the forest. But are there any sort of specific cultural narratives that you aim to explore in your poetry, through your poetry?
Culture's a tough thing for like, people who can trace their lineage in Canada back to like the early colonization.
Mm-hmm.
My sister's done one of those ancestry things,
Yeah.
and as we
Yeah.
suspected, we are as white as they come. We are like,
Yeah.
we can't boast any Indigenous. A
Yeah.
lot of Canadians. There's been,
Mm-hmm.
with the Métis or just like intermarriage or.
Yeah.
We are mostly Irish and Scottish, English, French, some Swedish snuck in
Yeah.
there. I was like
Yeah.
surprised to see that one. So like
Wow.
that is like
Yeah.
the most white culture
Quite.
ever.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And I've been to England.
Yeah.
I love it there. I think it's beautiful. It's obviously a very complex little island.
Yep. Yeah. Yep.
So
Yep.
wrestling through those feelings. And then I've never been to Ireland or Scotland. I'm hoping to maybe get there next year,
Sure.
because I do feel like I need to be on those lands to really I would like to write some poetry there.
Yeah.
I can tell you a little bit about what my next poetry plan is. My next
Aha.
book, actually.
Tell us.
It
Tell us.
really deals with this. So, my middle name, of
Yeah.
course, is
Yep.
Janine.
Janine. Yeah.
That is actually the name of both my grandmothers.
Really?
It's kind of fascinating. Yeah. Like
It's
my
interesting. Yeah.
mom's mom, dad's mom, both randomly named Janine. They're both a couple of French gals from back
Wow.
east.
Yeah.
One was born in Ottawa, one was
Yeah.
born in New Brunswick.
Mhm.
So I've decided that I'm going to write a collection of poems in conversations with my grandmothers.
Wow.
I'm going to call it Janine's. And part of the work will be to go to those places where they were born.
Wow.
And kind of be on those lands and think about them. And yeah, so culturally, like with my writing,
Yeah.
it really is just like a place of I struggle with this because my work, I've told you, my work on the Room Board, the oldest
Yeah.
feminist literary press, which I'm
Yeah.
very honored to be there. It's all about their huge thing is anti-oppression and
Yeah.
amplifying marginalized voices.
Sure.
So as someone who is white and a settler here, I am like so honored. And so, but at the same time, and there is this thing in culture right now of elevating
Yeah.
people of color in the
Yeah.
writing community. It's very big in Canada, and that's beautiful. And I'm like, I want to do that. I want to be in rooms that are doing
Sure.
that. But
Yeah.
I also have a voice and I also
Yeah.
have stories and I also have like a heart to share my thoughts with the world and my poems. And so I think just like talking about those things in my work is very
Yeah.
important. I'm starting to do more creative nonfiction just in for school, producing some work there. And I want to, I started writing my memoirs after the year I had, which you know
Yeah.
about. And
Yeah. I do. I do.
um, so it's just like about, yeah, like there's space for everyone. I think that's
Mhm.
something that maybe gets lost sometimes is there feels like, oh, it's only these people's stories we want to hear right now.
Yeah.
But actually like
Yeah.
there's this mentality of lack or
Yeah.
something. And I
Yeah.
don't subscribe to that.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Well, and to our listeners, my listeners here, you heard it here first. So there's an upcoming book by Sarah
Very early
Gawthrop,
stages.
early stages, gonna be called Janine's. But I love how you've been so creative around this process already, right? So thinking about your background and where you're coming from, and wanting to connect, right, with your
Hmm.
two grandmothers and use that as inspiration to write. So that's really
Hmm.
really going to be exciting. I'm looking forward to listening and to learning more about how this journey unfolds for you.
Thank you. I'm
And
excited.
thanks for sort of bringing us into this space of even just thinking about how do we lift other writers up? How do we lift other folks up? One of the
Hmm.
challenges that we face as writers. I'm calling myself a writer. Whoop, whoop. Right.
Yeah.
One of the challenges we face is some of the systemic issues that exist. Right. So, for example, I've had challenges getting my children's book out, right?
Hmm.
Because it's priced out of the market, like literally, because there are some forces that determine prices and determine pricing, and fighting with them, right? For example, my children's book, this book was initially priced at $52
Oh,
for the hardcover,
oh,
and then 35 something for the paperback. And
oh
over
my
the past couple
gosh.
of weeks, I think this is stretching to 6 7 weeks, I've been fighting, like have tons of emails that have gone back and forth between me and certain companies and individuals to try and get it down. Now it's down to a level where I'm happy that it's now accessible.
Hmm.
And so as you sit on these boards, so part of the perhaps challenge I give to you too, right, that as you sit on these boards, right, perhaps there could be ways of thinking about the end-to-end support, right? So yes, it's about the writing, but how are we also engaging the system of publishing, and how are we also engaging the system of distribution, right, to see that
Hmm.
the works of, as you mentioned earlier on, of black writers, of indigenous writers, of people of color, that the works are also put there and amplified and are accessible. If
Hmm.
if that makes sense. And so
Absolutely.
thank you for sitting at those tables as well. You are a person I know whose values I deeply respect too, right? In terms of making sure that everyone, it's just not one person, it's all of
Hmm.
us, black, white, indigenous, people of color, everyone. It's all our
Hmm.
voices that matter. And so thank you for centering that work. So I know that
Yeah.
you're engaged a lot on social media. How
Hmm.
is how is social media perhaps inspired you to write, or even how has it changed the way that you connect as well with your audience? Do you find it beneficial? Do you find it challenging? Can you let us into that kind of space?
Yeah. I I had such a different relationship with it when I first started. It was actually
Hmm.
such a beautiful little microcosm community that I'd found of
Hmm.
fellow poets. It was like I think I started the account in 2020, again around COVID times,
Oh yeah.
and
Uh-huh.
I just connected with so many like-minded people. I got my first publishing credit because of
Uh-huh.
connections I made with a
Oh
publisher
wow.
in England, and
Yeah.
then I ended up working for that press, which is sadly
Hmm.
no more.
Hmm.
But I just really got my start even in like publishing, and so it was such a beautiful gift, social media.
Mm-hmm.
But then I don't know where it shifted. Mainly Instagram is what I'm talking about. And
Yeah.
Instagram is like a strange beast now, where like I think just because like everywhere they've like tried to monetize, they make you
Oh yeah.
pay for the
Yeah.
blue check. Like
Mm-hmm.
they,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Mm-hmm.
like they really don't show creators' work. So it's
Yeah.
become kind of a hostile place. There's a
Yeah.
lot of me just like bemoaning with my other poetry friends on our private messages, being like, oh, this is
Yeah.
not the place anymore. We
Yeah.
need a new
Yeah.
place.
In a new place, eh?
And you know, you put all this effort into a
Mm.
beautiful reel or something, and like 50 people see it, and you try
Yeah.
not to make it about that. Like even
Yeah.
with my book, when I put it out, I was
Yeah.
like, maybe this won't do anything. If like
Mm.
one person finds it and it
Mm-hmm.
means something to them, that's a win.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, we all have an ego and we all want
Yeah.
our work to be seen. And
Sure.
so Instagram is the same. So what I've actually done is I've mostly gone over to Substack, which
Uh-huh.
is, in my mind, is for the writers.
Yeah.
It's a online blogging situation where you can curate it, make it look how you want. It's like
Yeah.
a newsletter where you can send it out. You can get subscribers. You can get paid, but I feel
Yeah.
like those are for bigger accounts, you know, that
Yeah.
have quite a following. I have maybe
Yeah.
like 50 people subscribed,
Mm-hmm.
but that's beautiful to me.
Sure. Yeah.
And it's where I'm sharing longer form poetry. I'm like playing around with stuff I'm writing in school, and then I'm like
Yeah.
soft launching it there. So it's just a nice place to have a body of work. And yeah, it's not so interactive as Instagram or other social medias. I have a
Yeah.
Facebook too, but that
Yeah.
feels kind of like a dinosaur at this point.
Are you on Facebook? I've never seen
I
you.
am. I'm like I have a Facebook page for like the 3-4 like older folks that follow me that are just
Yeah.
only on there for social media, and like
For
my
social media.
aunt
Yeah.
or my
Yeah.
cousin that doesn't have Instagram. It's just
Yeah.
like it's just another little drip on people. But
Yeah.
yeah, social media has kind of changed, but I still have the community that I initially started with, and we're very active. I'm gonna have like a wine Zoom chat with my really good friend
Nice.
in
Yeah.
England as soon as
Oh
she's back
wow.
from Paris.
Oh, nice.
So yeah, it's been beautiful for community building, but not so much for getting the work out in recent months.
It's interesting
Yeah.
because I sit in that space too, right? Where I also
Yeah.
try and push out my content on social media, Instagram and Facebook
I've seen
and
that.
Twitter. And yeah, like you too, right? That, sometimes it's like you put it out and you put it, a lot of work into just producing one post, right? And
Exactly.
it's just seen by, or one reel, and it's seen by 20 people or 30 people. And the consolation in the back of my mind, like here, is like, well, maybe the 20 people that saw it are the ones that really, really needed to see it, right? And maybe out of the
Exactly.
20, there were 3 people that needed to connect with that material and be inspired, be encouraged, right? But then, like you said, there's also an ego behind it too, to say, well, why only 50 people, yet I have 7,000 followers, right?
Right.
And so, and
Sucks.
that sucks. Yeah, true, that sucks. But also at the same time, is people go to social media for various reasons, right? And so, one of the things that I found interesting is to, is just to continue being genuine, continue being just as authentic, and just continue being me, for example. And
Yeah.
those that are looking for those, genuine conversations, authentic things being shared, they'll come to me, right? For that. Those that are interested in the poetry, through topophilia and your sense of placemaking will come to you, right? And I believe that it's just not, it's not a sprint. It's a marathon, right? That, you
Yeah.
keep on keeping on, you keep on keeping on, you keep on keeping on. One day, I'm gonna bookmark this. One day, we're gonna say, Patrick, do you remember October 28th when I was talking about my 54 subscribers on Substack? Now I've got like 300,000. How did that happen?
Yeah, manifest that. Ooh, ooh, ooh.
manifest that. And so, moving on from the socials, do you have any particular? And I know you've mentioned, the influence that you had, from a writer in the UK. Do you have any other? And I know, when you did go to LA for that, writing or poets, was it a poets in residence
It
program?
was just
It was,
writing
right?
retreat. Yeah.
Writing retreat.
Mhm.
Do you have any poets or any other writers that have had, most profound impact on your work? In what way have they been impactful? How have you used the power of their work to inform yours?
Yeah. So poetry wise, Mary Oliver,
Uh-huh.
who's passed away a few years ago now, but she was just like, when I first came into poetry in the COVID years, I
Mm-hmm.
really didn't read any, and I was very
Mm,
afraid of poetry.
mm,
The few that I
mm,
had read, the few poems, I was like, I don't understand. I feel stupid.
mm.
And like there was just this attitude of like you have to be like a friggin', I don't know, mind reader to
Yeah,
understand certain poetry.
yeah.
And then I found Mary Oliver, and she's so
Mm.
conversational, and it's all to nature, and
Okay.
it's very profound.
Mm,
She has a line that I kind of took, and I did an after poem, which is
yeah.
it's basically you can borrow a line from another poet, or you can just like do a
Mm,
poem in a nod to that poet, and then that's called an after poem.
okay.
So this one I think of hers is called Into the Woods, and the last line is, if you have ever come with me to the woods, I must love
Mm.
you very much.
Ah,
And it's
wow.
just like a small glimpse into her heart.
Yeah.
And actually, I pulled up another poem of hers that I was gonna, I put it in my story, and it's just like
Ah.
kind of perfectly encapsulates how I think and feel about just life in general. Like this, it's not
Mm,
just nature that she talks
mm,
about. She's also very profound in her just like philosophies and thinking about life. And the
yeah.
first couple lines, it's a poem called The Gardener, is, have
Mm,
I lived enough? Have I
mm,
loved enough?
mm.
Have I considered right action enough? And
Wow.
I was like, oh my gosh, like that is
Wow.
it. That is it.
Yeah. That's
So
profound.
yeah, she's very profound. A living poet that I love, a couple living poets I love
Mm-hmm.
are Kate Baer, who is a
Yeah.
mom from Pennsylvania. She's just
Uh-huh.
so brilliant. My
Nice.
favorite poem of hers is called Like a Wife. I
Uh-huh.
sometimes it's one I need to memorize.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah.
so
Okay.
good, and like it's
Wow.
such a sick burn of a poem.
Wow.
You just have to go
Uh-huh.
look it up. Kate
Oh,
Baer,
I
B
will. I
A
will.
E R,
BAER.
and
Okay.
Baer.
Mm-hmm.
She's amazing. And then another one is Joy Harjo. She
Yeah.
is oh my gosh, I'm trying to remember what nation she's from, but she's an indigenous poet from the state. She was a poet laureate.
Okay.
And also all these poets are very just conversational. They're very like
Mm,
beautiful imagery, storytelling poets.
mm.
Those are the poets I'm drawn to.
Yeah.
For like nonfiction, or just like I don't read a lot of fiction right now. I'm really into memoir. I have been most of my life.
Yeah.
I love Jedediah Jenkins, who is
Okay.
the man I went to see in LA. He
Yeah,
taught
yeah,
this
yeah.
writing workshop. He is profound, just like again, philosophical,
Yep.
very introspective. Like the good sign of like memoir, creative nonfiction is like someone who is, and he even said this to us in the writing retreat. He's like, don't
Yeah.
worry so much about like saying the right best thing.
Mm.
Figure out what you think about the world and your feelings and thoughts around the world, and then write that.
So that's
And
the authenticity, right? I was talking about earlier on. Like just,
yes,
what are your thoughts? Can you be authentic and can you put it out there, right?
yes,
Because I think the world is lacking that. There's a lot of fakeness, there's a lot of
yes,
you know? So I love
100%.
what Jedediah Jenkins said to you in that
Yes,
radio
it's
retreat.
been very, very formative for my own
Mm,
writing.
mm,
And then who else? Yeah, I mean, Joy Harjo also writes memoir, and I love
yeah.
her. She has one called Poet Warrior that was
Uh,
super profound. Helen Knott is another. She's from Fort St. John. She's
okay.
from Treaty Six, I believe, another
Yeah.
Indigenous poet,
Yeah.
writer. And again, it's conversational, it's self-reflective, it's
Yeah.
hard
I love it.
topics
Yeah, I love
that
it.
she writes in a really narrative, lyrical, beautiful
Yeah.
way. So those
If
are really the writers I'm drawn to.
that's awesome. As you say that, I'm inclined to say that it sounds like anyone can write, anyone can be a poet. Would that be a correct assertion?
Absolutely. There's certain ingredients, I would
Mm,
say, that
mm,
make a good poem, and
okay.
they can be very conversational. It's right. I'm
Yeah.
learning a lot about the technicalities of poetry, and like
Okay.
line breaks, and when to
Yeah.
put an em dash, and like
Uh-huh.
whether you should put punctuation or not. That's a
Yeah.
point of
Yeah.
tension for my one
Mm,
prof.
yep. Yep.
A lot of
Uh-huh.
us are like, we don't like
We don't like.
punctuation, and
Yeah.
he's
Yeah.
like, you need it, otherwise I'm
Oh my
very
god.
distracted.
Yep.
But yeah, it's like you want
Yep.
vivid imagery. You want to
Mm-hmm.
try and avoid abstractions like
Okay.
hope and love. Like you want to say these things in a different way.
Okay.
Metaphor is a
Okay.
huge part of poetry. And if you're good at metaphor, which I don't often feel like I
Yeah.
am, like you are made in the shade poetry wise.
Wow.
Yeah, just tell a story,
Yeah.
excavate your soul and put it on the page. And
Yeah.
basically you can be a poet.
Wow. Wow. I just off the top of my head, I can think of a couple of my friends that, have got stories to tell. And sometimes when they tell their stories, I'm like, I wonder if this just could be just put in a poem, and some people
Mm-hmm.
could benefit from just reading these genuine, authentic, flow of words that are there. And so you've
Mm-hmm.
spoken to us about some of the people that have had profound impact on your work. I'm wondering, do you have any, if you could collaborate with any artist, or you whether musician or painter, who would they be, and then why?
Mm. Oh man, I've never thought about
Uh
this.
huh.
I'm in a new media class at school,
Hmm.
which I wouldn't have even been able to explain what new media is before.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
an online class, so those are
Yeah.
always an interesting beast. But
Hmm.
it's
Hmm.
basically like blogging would fall under new media. I was hanging
Oh
out with
wow.
some
Okay.
girlfriends last night and they're like, do you remember those Netflix shows that were like choose your own adventure?
Yeah.
Like an actual whole show where you could like, I don't know,
Ah.
press a button and then the characters would do this one thing or they'd do this other thing. That's
Wow.
considered new media.
New media.
Hypertext link
Mm.
poetry is new
Mm.
media. So you like click it and it brings you to the some of it's really weird.
Wow.
But something like even the reels that I make on Instagram where I put music behind
Sure.
them and I
Yep.
have a
Hmm.
voiceover and beautiful
Hmm.
images of like
Hmm.
nature, that's
Hmm.
considered new media.
Wow.
So to do something with music would be really beautiful. I mean, I have some friends that make music. One
Mhm.
guy, he makes some really cool stuff. I don't know, something like that maybe one day with some spoken word, like to do some
Sure.
visual, like video.
Visual, video, media, kind of, interesting.
Yeah, something like that would be really
Do a
cool.
poetry jam with a guitar, with someone
Yeah.
playing in the
Oh man,
background. Wow, that would be awesome.
I kind of like I'm very a very insular, very solo,
Hmm.
and that's very indicative of the writing
Yeah,
life. It is a very
yeah,
solitary thing. That's why I think
it is.
community outside is so
Mm,
important. Why
mm,
I'm really excited to be involved, getting
yeah,
involved in like with the other classmates at my school
yeah,
and possibly on the editorial board of the
mm,
magazine there and
mm,
my room work
mm,
room magazine, just like having community outside because the writing life is very solitary
yeah,
and it's just you at your desk with
yep.
your
With
computer
your computer, yep.
writing your words or you're
Mm,
writing your note poems into
yep,
your notes app.
yep,
It's like it's very solitary, so to try and
yep.
figure out a way to do more collaborative work would be an
That's that's great.
amazing next
That's,
step.
that's great. I love it. I love it. And talking about next steps, I know we're just running out of time here. Um, Last question is, if you're to give any advice, right? Like I said, I've got a couple of friends that do listen to this podcast, and then phone me like, "How would you even say this?" So I'm not gonna say their names, but I've got a couple of friends that I've told time and time again that you need to write, you need to write. So apart from just writing poetry, do you have any advice that you would give someone who wants to start writing? Like, what would you say to them?
Yeah.
Mm,
Okay. So I have thoughts on this
yeah.
because I very much believe that everyone has the ability to write. It
Mm,
doesn't have to be, I was born on this day and I
mm,
am now at this stage in my
mm,
life. Like,
mm,
this is the thing about life is like we all have our unique experiences and our
yeah.
unique thoughts. And it's
Yeah.
it's it's daunting and scary to think I
Mm-hmm.
have these thoughts, but to actually put them down
Yeah.
and similar to like if you're in a marriage and that person just won't go get the help they need and you
Yeah.
think your life is a mess and you need
Yeah.
counseling, like no one is going to go and do that thing until they decide within themselves they want to
That
do
they
it.
want to do it. That's
So
that's
it's
deep.
very you're such a like amazing friend to see
Yeah.
that in that person.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, like they have to find that within themselves. And it's like so daunting. I know many people think,
Yeah.
I'm not a writer. I couldn't do
Mm-hmm.
this.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone can do it. You just
Mm-hmm.
have to sit down, put your butt in a chair and
Yeah.
start. And maybe it'll be bad.
Yeah.
But just like communication obviously is like
Yeah.
is a skill.
Yeah.
And so it's just another piece of advice from Jedediah was like say
Mm-hmm.
it's strange, just like you
Mm.
in my creative nonfiction class we're
Yeah.
talking
Yeah.
about the various components that make good memoirs, like, and it doesn't even have to be memoir. It could be like, I'm writing some stories, secondhand stories I've heard of,
Yeah.
like fishing practices of the Wasanich
Yeah.
Nation, which is
Yeah.
the indigenous nation where you live,
Where I
and
am.
how,
Yep.
and how like that was very,
Mm.
it really just meant a lot to me to like
Yeah.
hear just the difference of ecological
Yeah.
and sustainability versus how
Yeah.
colonization came in and how they
Yeah.
messed it all up, of course.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you can write about anything. And
Yeah.
I think I would just say, like, to, you can journal or just jot some notes in your phone. Just like you just have to start, like anything. It's a practice. And don't be afraid if it's not good. And,
It's not. Yeah.
eventually you could find a Sarah and maybe have
Yep.
them come along and
Yep.
help you tune it up a bit.
Yep. And speaking of that, thank you, Sarah, for helping me tune up my memoir. Right. So I gotta drop there. So everybody needs a Sarah, and so if you're listening and you want someone to help edit or polish up your manuscript or get into the weeds, Sarah Gawthrop would be able to do that. And
I love it. It was such a joy. It was so fun. Highlight of my little writing career so far, for sure.
Oh my word, Sarah. Thank you so much for coming on to the Voices Listed with Dr. PMak show. Sarah is an accomplished writer. She's an editor. She's done amazing work. She's got a number of publishing credits to her name, and I can't wait to receive my copy of Janine's. So get back into that writing room and then get working. So thank you so much for just giving us insights into your journey with poetry into the processes that you have.
Thanks for having me. We'll
Awesome.
talk to you again soon.
Yeah, hopefully talk to you again soon. Thank you so much, Sarah. And friends, this is Voices Listed with Dr. PMak. Thank you for listening to the podcast. Until next time, peace. Thank you for listening to the Voices Listed podcast with Dr. PMak. I hope you enjoyed insights that came out of this conversation. Keep your notifications on. Our next episode will be dropping soon. Thank you and enjoy.